A very good day to Dr. Asong and fellow classmates. Today my group and I will be presenting about substance abuse among athletes.
The issues of drug abuse is common in the sports world. Since the 3rd century, in order to enhance the performance of athletes, several medications have already been utilized.
It is a common condition for athletes to use substances at a higher rate than those in the non-athletes population. Substance abuse can aid the athletes in many ways, as demonstrated in the figure shown beside. However, long-term dependence on this substance can lead to substance abuse, which is unhealthy to both the physical and psychological conditions of the athletes. In the following section, the prevalence rate of substance abuse, the substance abuse motivation, related law and resolution will be discussed further in the global perspective.
This graph was posted by the Anti-Doping Agency of Malaysia. It revealed the number of urine tests that have been conducted according to sports, and its last update was in December 2019. In Malaysia, there were a great amount of doping cases existing among young dubbing athletes. According to the Anti-Doping Agency of Malaysia, from the year 2010 onwards until 2019, there were a total of 115 athletes under the athletes suspension list. It was found that most of the athletes that were on the suspension list were the athletes that were involved in weightlifting and bodybuilding, which is more than 50% of them.
To explain the occurrence of substance abuse phenomena, there are two theories which can be applied here. They are social learning theory and operational conditioning theory. Let's first have a look at social learning theory. Social learning theory is a theory proposed by Albert Bandura, in which the central idea of this theory is that individuals acquire or learn a behavior through observation. According to social learning theory, the individual, environment, and behavior tend to interact with each other. In the case of substance abuse among athletes, undertaking of substance begin from modeling or observing from coaches or peers that acted as role models, and the maintenance of substance abuse is due to social reinforcement and athletes' desirable consequences. It is a reciprocal relationship. After the exposure which initiates the process of consuming substance, the athletes will continue to take in if many positive expectations are anticipated. For example, if an athlete discovers a substance that is effective in assisting him to win the competition through enhancement of stamina, then the athlete will continue consuming it and as time goes by, become addicted to it.
The second theory that can be used to explain motivation is operant conditioning theory by B.F. Skinner. This is one of the earliest psychological theory, and according to this theory, the addiction to substance occurs when an individual is experiencing pleasurable effects such as excitement, pleasure, or good feelings. Stated by Skinner, repeatedly doing the same thing that will provide a sense of pleasure is a normal condition. Hence, it is normal that athletes repeat the behavior of consuming drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes, as this kind of behavior contributes a sense of pleasure to them. Besides that, the result shows that the main reason athletes doping is because they desire to win in the games. By consuming drugs, the feeling of powerful and strong will be developed, which is a positive reinforcement when they are against their rivals. Furthermore, it also keeps them away from the feeling of severe pain and loss. Next is the substance abuse motivations. The first motivation is impediments in achieving victory. A research done by Parnabas et al. 2013 indicates that the main objective that motivates substance usage in the athletes in Malaysia is to achieve victory in sports games. This is due to the athletes believing that if they did not consume drugs, they could not win in the sports game. Their desire to win the games drives them to do anything that can assist them to victory, including consume drugs. Besides that, one of the major motivations that drives them to consume drugs is to serve as coping strategies. According to other research findings of Parnabas et al. 2013, the findings reveal that consuming drugs and smoking are the highest usage of negative coping strategies of athletes in Malaysia. This is due to the tendency of drugs and cigarettes in reducing stress and anxiety.
While the previous speaker talked about the prevalence of substance abuse among athletes within the national context, now let's have a look at this issue from a global perspective, which is very valuable in providing a wider vision. Among all the different types of substance, only the statistic information of the three most commonly used substances will be discussed. First, the performance-enhancing drugs. Example of performance-enhancing drugs include anabolic steroids, human growth hormone, and beta blockers. Among World Championship participants, the rate of consuming banned drug is above 30%, and above 45% was found among athletes in the 2011 Pan Arab Games. Also, according to a survey in 2011, among world-class athletes, above 57% of world-class athletes were confirmed to engage in the usage of performance-enhancing drugs. Secondly, alcohol. Among athletes, binge drinking with recent episodic heavy drinking was disclosed to have a rate of 25% to 50%. Lastly, tobacco. They reported an estimation of 5% in the athletes' population were involved in smoking and varies across age and gender. Besides, in 2011, a study by Maclay found that 15 from 100 professional players were labeled as active nicotine users, and approximately 1/3 to 1/2 are involved in nicotine in some way. People might assume that this reported rate alone seems to be low. However, one must remember that the prevalence rate here is just taken in sports setting. If you compare with the world prevalence of smoking, which is about 25%, you know how alarming it is. As an extra information, by looking at the map display here, it was reported that athletes from 63 countries out of 205 which took part in the 2016 Olympics have experiences of suspension for doping. By collecting information globally, many different motivations underlying substance abuse among athletes were reported. One of them is to compete on a higher level. This desire among athletes usually comes from pressure of their hope to succeed at all costs, which is also rooted from athletes' organizations and family high expectations, as well as fear of failure because they are concerned with what people think of them. Sometimes athletes who set unreachable personal goals are also very susceptible to substance abuse because they tend to use it as a way to relieve themselves. Furthermore, some of the athletes rely on substance abuse as a coping strategy after injury. They will consume pain medication which exceeds the usual amount in order to continue playing. Opioid is one example of it. The substance accessibility further deteriorates the situation. Nowadays, drugs like painkillers are accessible to athletes via different channels such as family, other non-medical sources, and some training rooms even have a complete chain of supplements. Sometimes athletes do not intentionally want to consume related substance. However, they end up becoming addicted to it. Social does play a role too. As athletes are in the positions of interacting with many parties, they have to get used to many social situations, and thus, this has increased the risk of addiction, particularly to alcohol. Interestingly, coping for retirement can be a factor too. Athletes generally retired earlier compared to other careers. For those athletes who are not psychologically prepared for leaving the game as well as the thrilling experiences gained through competition, they might not be able to get used to it and therefore need a way to cope with the unbalanced psychological phenomena. Obviously, substance abuse is one of the common ways. Last but not least, coping with mental illness will as well contribute to substance abuse among athletes. This is consistent with Redden and Credo viewpoint, in which athletes are less likely to seek mental treatment because it was perceived as a sign of weaknesses. Therefore, they opt for substance abuse behavior for self-cure.
In Malaysia, there is an established anti-doping agency called Anti-Doping Agency of Malaysia, or in short form ADAMAS, which is under the Ministry of Youth and Sports that conducts doping tests on athletes. The beginning of the establishment of this agency can be dated back in 2003, when the Ministry of Youth and Sports decided to sign on Copenhagen Declaration of Anti-Doping in Sport, and this declaration has had some changes and agreed by the countries who were in as well at the Second World Anti-Doping Conference in 2003. In 2007, ADAMAS was originally established within the National Sports Institute, but in 2016, it was detached and established as an independent agency within the supervisor of the Ministry of Youth and Sports and can be found at the ministry under the label of Anti-Doping Wing.
From global perspective, the most popular organization aimed to reduce the phenomena of doping among athletes is known as the World Anti-Doping Agency. The World Anti-Doping Agency was founded in 1999 as the largest international independent organization engaged by sport authorities and governments from all around the world. The main tasks of World Anti-Doping Agency including the conduction of scientific research, the development of educational programs, flourish anti-doping capacity within the athletes, and monitoring the implementation and adherence of World Anti-Doping Code, which is a document that harmonizes anti-doping policies in all sports and all countries.
Since the declaration acknowledged the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, and its code, therefore, ADAMAS recognizes WADA as an authoritative agency for anti-doping in sports. Growing from this, eventually the system of Malaysian anti-doping is based upon rules of WADA. The following are the Anti-Doping Code of Conduct as stated by WADA. Article 2 Anti-Doping Rule Violations. 2.1 The presence of a prohibited substance or its metabolites or markers in an athlete sample. 2.2 Use or attempted use by an athlete of a prohibited substance or a prohibited method. 2.3 Evading, refusing, or failing to submit to sample collection. 2.4 Whereabout failures. Any combination of 3 missed tests and or filling failures within a 12-month period by an athlete in a registered testing pool. 2.5 Tampering or attempted tampering with any part of doping control. 2.6 Possession of a prohibited substance or prohibited method. 2.7 Trafficking or attempted trafficking in any prohibited substance or prohibited method. 2.8 Administration or attempted administration to any athlete in competition of any prohibited method or prohibited substance, or administration or attempted administration to any athlete out of competition of any prohibited method or any prohibited substance that is prohibited out of competition. 2.9 Complicity Assisting, encouraging, aiding, abetting, conspiring, covering up, or any other type of intentional complicity involving an ADRV or any attempted ADRV. 2.10 Prohibited association, associating with a person such as a coach, doctor, or physio who has been found guilty of a criminal or disciplinary offense equivalent to a doping violation.
The codes below are based on World Anti-Doping Code 2021 associated with the impact of doping among athletes. Article 10 of the World Anti-Doping Code concerned about the sanction of individuals athletes due to the result of doping. For example, Article 10.1 mentioned about the disqualification of result in the competition where there is a violation of anti-doping rules. An anti-doping rules violation occurring during or in conjunction with any event may result in the disqualification of all the result of the athletes gained in that event with consequences including forfeiture of medal, point, prizes as determined by the ruling body of the event. Article 10.11 Forfeited prize money proposed that if an anti-doping organization or other signatory recovers prize money forfeited as a result of an anti-doping violation, it must take reasonable steps to allocate and distribute the prize money to other athletes who would have entitled to it if the forfeiting athlete had not competed. At the same time, an international federation's rules may specify whether or not the redistributed prize money will be taken into account when ranking athletes. Article 10.12 outlines the financial consequences of athletes that found to be doping, in which anti-doping organizations may provide reasonable financial sanction for anti-doping rules infractor in their own rules. Anti-doping organizations, on the other hand, may only impose financial punishment if the maximum time of ineligibility has been imposed. Besides that, no cost recovery or financial sanction may be used to reduce ineligibility or any other sanction that would otherwise be imposed under the code. Lastly, Article 10.14 indicated the status of athletes during the period of ineligibility or provisional suspension. According to Article 10.14.1, participation is prohibited during the period of ineligibility or provisionally suspended. During the time of ineligibility or provisional suspension, no athlete is allowed to participate in any competition or activity except those anti-doping education or rehabilitation programs which are organized and sanctioned by any signatory or signatories members organization.
So one of the initiatives done by Adamas is the development of an educational program through one webinar to spread awareness and knowledge as well with any changes made in WADC and Adamas 2021 rules. It involves National and International Sport Association, Recreational Sport Association, National Sport Council, Institution of National Sport, higher institutions, government agency, and sports schools. Secondly, educational talk. It is aimed to share information regarding anti-doping, bring awareness to the athletes and coaches in Malaysia on the dangers of doping, as well as to expose the updated prohibited dope. The target is athlete and coaching staff. The second initiative done by the Adamas is building of new anti-doping test lab. In 2018, Adamas reported a newly started project on building a new anti-doping test lab, which will be accredited by the WADA, and this is to allow more tests to be conducted. Though this is not the first anti-doping test lab in Malaysia, as there used to be one in Penang, but due to failure of fulfilling the requirements of international testing standard, its accreditation was revoked.
One of the efforts of World Anti-Doping Agency in preventing and reducing athletes doping is the conduction of educational programs. Education is a critical component of any anti-doping program as it helps to increase awareness, inform, communicate, and establish value with life skill and decision-making competence to prevent intentional and unintentional anti-doping rule violation. Firstly, World Anti-Doping Agency is committed to improving evidence-based doping prevention strategy through the conduction of social science research. The conduction of social science research helps to increase public understanding on the differences between athletes who choose to compete clean sport and those who resort to doping, as well as why some athletes choose to dope, despite being well aware of the adverse impact of doping and anti-doping rules. Overall, will help in the development of effective and efficient doping prevention technique. Next, educational programs is conducted through the launching of new anti-doping education and learning platform in January 2021. It is a mobile app that help people to get educated and find the technical anti-doping help when they need to. Through the apps, users are able to access to online lessons, resources for athletes, quiz, video, webinar, and more. Drug testing will be done usually on Olympic athletes. An effective drug testing and investigative system not only to boost the deterrent effect, but also protect clean athletes and the spirit of sport by catching those who violate anti-doping rules, as well as being helpful in disrupting those who participate in doping behaviors due to strict rules has been implemented.
Another resolution for both global and nation is motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing is a counseling method that has been shown to be effective in managing substance abuse behavior by enhancing an individual's internal motivation to change. The four therapeutic processes included in motivational interviewing are: first, express empathy. For example, therapist expresses understanding towards athletes' problems such as substance abuse. Secondly, is to support self-efficacy. Therapists can encourage athletes to make their own decisions whether to change substance abuse behavior or not. Third, role with resistance. For example, therapist does not argue with the athlete's opposite thoughts, but discusses with them regarding the consequences of a particular action. Fourth, developing goal discrepancy to motivate changes. Maybe the athlete's goal is to achieve complete abstinence from opioid drugs, but currently he is overly used when he feels pain due to injuries he suffered from his sports career. Therefore, by having this motivational interviewing, it aims to help the athlete to rebuild themselves and manage their substance abuse.
Coming to the end of the presentation, we have seen that substance abuse is no longer a new topic, but it is still relevant today. Much previous research has been focusing on the impact of drug abuse on sport athletes. However, little attention was given to the motivation underlying why athletes consume different types of substances, why they are susceptible to it, and eventually become addicted to it. Thus, through this investigation, substance usage motivations and relevant laws were discovered at least two levels of perspective, nationally and internationally, as well as resolution which are assumed to be applicable were suggested. For instance, via education, development of positive coping strategy, so on and so forth. It is important for different parties to acknowledge the harmful effect of substance abuse among athletes, such as hazardous to health, low performance level, and being banned from important competitions. Also, only through a deep investigation on the substance abuse motivation, all relevant entities such as government, sport institutions, coaches, family, and peers can act in the best course of action to assist athletes. There has been some research that aimed to investigate how some athletes are personally motivated in avoiding consumption of substance based on self-determination theory. This has highlighted that more research in sport setting should be called on to gain further insight. So that's all from us. Thank you.